It began with silence. The kind of silence that made people stop whatever they were doing. The kind that spread slowly and then all at once, sweeping through streets, offices, farms, and battlefields alike. Satellites began blinking out one by one without warning, their signals dying like candles in a storm. At first, governments thought it was a solar flare, a magnetic storm, or perhaps a malfunction. But then came the second wave, communication networks crashing simultaneously across the globe, planes frozen mid-flight, the oceans calm and unreasonably still, and the faint hum of static filling every radio frequency on Earth. Then, at dawn, the horizon turned red. It wasn't the sun rising, it was the atmosphere burning. Something vast, something beyond comprehension, was entering orbit. And as the first shadows streaked across the clouds, humanity looked up to see what had come for them. A shape blotted out the stars, stretching across the sky, bigger than the moon, alive with moving lights. It wasn't one ship. It was hundreds. No, thousands. They moved like a school of predators, shifting as one mind, covering the sky with the shadow of extinction. In every city, from New York to Nairobi, people stopped and stared. Some whispered prayers, others screamed, and others recorded the spectacle with shaking hands. The news networks that still worked called it the arrival. But it wasn't an arrival. It was an invasion. The Galactic Empire had come, a civilization that ruled thousands of worlds, that bent entire species to its will, that erased those who didn't kneel. To them, Earth was nothing more than a forgotten backwater world, a primitive planet that had drifted too far from history. Humanity had been quiet for too long. The galactic archives had written them off as extinct centuries ago, a race of warmongers who destroyed themselves before learning peace. The Empire's warlords came to claim a dead world, not a living one. They came to plant their banners, mine the resources, and leave nothing behind. Their ships entered the atmosphere without resistance. No missiles, no warning shots, not even a broadcast. The alien generals smirked. "So this is humanity," said one of them, his voice echoing through the command bridge. "A dead species that doesn't even know it's being buried." He gave the order to descend. Thousands of landing craft broke through the clouds, trailing fire and thunder. From orbit, the sight was beautiful, dozens of red streaks racing toward the ground. But on the surface, it was terrifying. The sound of their engines shook entire continents, windows shattered in cities, and birds fled the forests in flocks that blackened the sky. The first ships landed in what used to be Washington, D.C. The ruins of the old world stood silent, covered in vines and cracked monuments. The alien soldiers stepped out in their black armor, their glowing rifles humming softly. They found no defenders, no armies, no signs of civilization beyond decay. The scanners showed no human heat signatures within miles. "Empty," one soldier reported. "They are gone." The commander smirked. "Then we claim what's left." They began erecting flags, setting up their machines, and sending data back to orbit. But as they worked, the ground trembled. Faintly at first, then stronger, a low pulse like a heartbeat echoed through the soil. The soldiers froze. "Seismic activity?" one asked. The commander shook his head. "No tectonic movement detected. It's rhythmic. It's alive." In orbit, aboard the flagship Vigilus, Admiral Khan of the Galactic Empire watched the readings with a sneer. "So the dead world still moves," he said. "Perhaps there are animals left to hunt." His officers laughed. Then, out of nowhere, a new transmission broke through their communications system. It wasn't from any of their ships. It came from the surface. A single voice, calm, human, and heavy with age spoke through every channel at once. "Turn back now," it said. "This is your only warning." The laughter on the command deck died instantly. The admiral leaned forward. "Who is this? Identify yourself." There was no response, only static. Then the voice repeated, slower this time, like a heartbeat growing louder. "Turn back now." The admiral growled. "Find the source of that transmission and silence it." But when they traced it, the signal didn't come from one place, it came from everywhere. From the oceans, from the mountains, from the atmosphere itself. It came from Earth. Below, the alien troops began to experience strange interference. Their scanners failed, their rifles glitched, and their vehicles refused to move. The commander shouted orders, but his voice was drowned by static. Then something new appeared on their radar, a faint pulse moving underground, circling them. One of the soldiers looked down and gasped. The earth beneath their boots was glowing, faint lines of blue light spreading outward like veins, forming symbols none of them could recognize. "Commander," one of them screamed, "it's spreading." The alien commander shouted for retreat, but it was too late. The symbols flashed once, then went dark. A second later, a shockwave rippled through the ground, throwing them into the air like leaves in a storm. When the dust cleared, the entire landing site was gone, erased. From orbit, it was as if nothing had ever been there. The admiral slammed his fist on the console. What just happened? The sensors showed nothing but electromagnetic chaos. Far beneath the surface, deep within an ancient bunker buried since the 21st century, machines that had slept for centuries woke up. Lights flickered on, servers hummed to life, and the old systems began to speak in a digital language older than the Empire itself. "Protocol Black Shield activated," said a mechanical voice. Across the planet, satellites long thought to be dead began to turn, their lenses glowing with cold light. In the deserts of Nevada, a hidden hangar opened, releasing a fleet of drones that rose into the sky like a swarm of angry hornets. The aliens in orbit detected the launches immediately. "Unidentified craft detected," one officer reported. "Their design, it's ancient." The admiral frowned. "Ancient?" The officer nodded. "Yes, sir, but they're adapting. The technology is rewriting itself." Back on Earth, people who had been hiding in the underground shelters for generations began to emerge. They had lived in silence, preserving their ancestors' knowledge, waiting for the day the stars would turn red again. The oldest among them, veterans of the First Galactic Wars, stood under the rising light and whispered, "They've come back." In one shelter deep beneath the Rockies, an old man wearing a military jacket placed his hand on a glowing console. "Echo," he said softly, "wake up." The room shook as the AI responded, its voice both mechanical and human. "I never slept," it said. "I was waiting for you to call." Up above, the Empire continued its descent. The Admiral's arrogance had returned. "Send more troops," he ordered. "I want every continent under control by nightfall." His officers obeyed, but when the next wave of ships entered the atmosphere, something unexpected happened. The air thickened, their engines struggled, and their navigation systems froze. "We're losing altitude," one pilot shouted. The admiral barked into his comms, "Compensate." But they couldn't. The ships were caught in something invisible, something powerful. Gravity itself was shifting, bending around the planet. And then, in the static-filled chaos, the human voice returned, echoing through every frequency in the fleet. It spoke softly, almost regretfully. "You were warned." The first explosion came from the sky. One of the Empire's ships ignited midair, a silent flash that turned night into day. The others followed, falling like burning meteors into the oceans below. Panic spread across the fleet. "We're under attack," shouted an officer. "By who?" The admiral didn't answer, because deep down, he already knew. This was no dead planet. This was a fortress. A trap. A memory that refused to die. As he watched the chaos unfold, the voice came one last time, colder, sharper, filled with a quiet rage that made every living thing on board tremble. "We told you once to turn back," it said. "You didn't listen. Now you'll learn why we stopped talking to the stars." And just like that, the transmission ended. The fleet hung above the glowing world, surrounded by a silence that felt alive. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Empire felt fear. Down below, the Earth turned slowly, its blue oceans reflecting the fire of the fallen ships. Deep inside its core, the old systems hummed with power, and a mechanical voice whispered in the dark, "Welcome home." Humanity was awake. The second wave came without hesitation, roaring through the sky like a storm of burning metal, tearing through clouds as their engines screamed across the horizon, leaving trails of fire behind them that stretched for miles. The Galactic Empire had decided that mercy was a waste of time, and now their invasion began in full force. Massive troop carriers broke the sound barrier as they descended, shaking buildings, uprooting trees, and sending waves of dust rolling across empty plains. Their commanders believed they were descending into a world long dead, that humanity's warning was nothing more than a desperate bluff from a forgotten race clinging to old myths. But as the first carriers touched the ground, the air felt wrong, too heavy, too quiet, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. The alien soldiers marched out in tight formations, armored from head to toe, their exosuits glowing with crimson energy. They fanned out across the ruins of human cities, old skeletons of concrete and steel buried under vines and silence. What had once been New York was nothing more than a forest of twisted metal towers, their tops lost in mist. The alien commander stepped forward, claws clicking against the cracked pavement, scanning the horizon through his visor. "No resistance detected," he said with a sneer. "Deploy the beacon. This world belongs to the Empire now." His soldiers moved quickly, planting the shining spire in the ground, its lights pulsing red as it sent a signal back to orbit, confirmation that the first colony site was secure. But as the signal left the planet's surface, something unseen intercepted it, twisting it, and before it could reach the fleet above, the transmission died in static. A low hum rippled through the air, faint at first, like distant thunder. The soldiers froze, their helmets picking up strange interference. "Sir," one of them said, "our scanners just shut down." The commander frowned, adjusting his visor. "Reboot the system." But nothing happened. The screens on their wrist modules flickered once and went dark. Then, from the direction of the ruined skyline, came a strange glow, pale blue, faint at first, but spreading fast, crawling through the ground like veins of fire. The alien commander shouted, "Pull back," but it was too late. The light reached their feet and the earth beneath them trembled. The air filled with a low metallic hum, deep and rhythmic, almost like the beating of a colossal heart buried beneath the surface. The aliens raised their weapons, scanning the ruins, but there was no enemy in sight, only that strange blue light pulsing faster and faster, as if something below was waking up. "This is impossible," muttered the commander. "The planet's core is responding to our presence." He didn't know that what he called a planet's core was far more than molten rock. Deep beneath their boots, humanity's ancient defense network, buried after the last war, was coming online. The skies darkened suddenly, clouds swirling in unnatural patterns. From above, the fleet commanders in orbit watched their screens flash with distortion. "Sir," one of them called out, "the planet's magnetosphere just spiked. We're detecting massive energy signatures, old technology, but advanced." Admiral Khan, watching from the bridge of the flagship, grinned. "Old human tricks," he said. "Wipe the area clean." Orders went out instantly, and the sky erupted in fire as the Empire's orbital cannons fired down upon the landing zone. Blue beams sliced through the clouds, slamming into the surface, turning the Earth to molten glass. The tremors reached across continents. The Admiral smiled coldly. No species could survive that. But before the dust cleared, his smile faded. The scanners showed movement. Dozens of small heat signatures were still active and growing. "Sir, something's coming out of the crater," an officer said. The Admiral leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Visuals." The screen flickered, then focused on the surface. Out of the smoking crater, rising slowly through the fire, came shapes, metallic, humanoid, tall as buildings, their eyes glowing with blue fire. They looked like ancient war machines, but they moved with the precision of something alive. Humanity's titans had awoken. On the ground, the surviving alien soldiers stared in horror as one of the machines turned its head toward them. Its armor was covered in dust and rust, yet it stood unbroken after centuries. The commander screamed, "Fire! Fire now!" Energy bolts filled the air, hitting the machine in a storm of light, but the blasts simply bent around it, absorbed into its hull. Then the machine's chest opened, revealing a glowing core, and with a sound like thunder tearing through stone, it unleashed a pulse of energy that flattened everything in its path. Buildings turned to ash, alien armor melted, and ships in orbit detected the explosion from miles above. The pulse wasn't an attack, it was a signal. Across the globe, hidden beneath oceans, mountains, and frozen tundra, the same pulse was received. Massive underground facilities lit up one by one, revealing thousands of dormant machines, all linked to a single source. A voice, deep and ancient, echoed through their communication lines. Protocol 1 initiated. Defense systems active. Every human base that had survived underground stirred with life. The old AIS came online, scanning the sky and locking onto enemy positions. And then came the human voice, calm, firm, unshaken. This is Earth Command. You are trespassing on restricted territory. Withdraw immediately or face total annihilation. The alien fleet froze. The Admiral barked, who's transmitting that? But there was no origin point. The signal came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Every ship heard it, every soldier felt it, as if the planet itself was speaking directly into their minds. You can't frighten us, the Admiral hissed. You're relics. He turned to his communications officer. Tell them the Empire does not negotiate. But before the officer could send the message, the screens went dark again. A single line of text appeared in every human and alien language known across the galaxy. You were warned. And then, all at once, the Earth responded. From the poles to the equator, beams of blue energy shot into the sky, piercing clouds, connecting into a massive grid that wrapped around the planet like a living shield. The alien fleet opened fire, but their weapons scattered uselessly against the field. The sky itself seemed to shimmer, absorbing every blast. Then, from orbit, the invaders' radar filled with hundreds of fast-moving objects, old human satellites that had suddenly turned on, changing orbit with unnatural precision. They formed a ring around the fleet, each one glowing brighter until space itself seemed to burn. They are targeting us, an officer screamed. The Admiral shouted for countermeasures, but nothing worked. Every attempt to fire, to run, to jam, failed. On the surface, one of the human bunkers opened, and out stepped Colonel Daniel Holt, the last commander of the old Earth Defense Corps. His armor was worn but functional, his eyes hidden behind a cracked visor. He looked up at the sky as the enemy fleet began to fall into disarray. You shouldn't have come here, he said softly, his voice echoing through the comms network that now belonged entirely to humanity. You should have listened. Echo, the planetary AI, responded in a tone as calm as ever. Targets locked. Awaiting your order. Holt stood silently for a moment, watching the burning streaks of enemy ships across the sky, then said 3 simple words. Begin Phase 2. The Admiral's ship shook violently as a shockwave passed through orbit, strong enough to knock out their artificial gravity. The stars outside the viewport flickered, bending around Earth like light through glass. The Admiral stumbled to his knees. What are they doing? The answer came too late. Echo had activated the planetary rail system, massive magnetic cannons hidden beneath the crust. From every continent, they fired simultaneously, unleashing bolts of plasma that punched through the clouds and tore into the Empire's ships. The fleet's formation collapsed instantly. One by one, the ships exploded, each blast lighting the night sky. Down below, the human survivors watched from the ruins as the heavens burned. For centuries, the galaxy had forgotten the name of Earth. But now, the stars themselves carried its voice. And through the static and the fire, the same transmission played again. Calm, ancient, unstoppable. We warned you once, the voice said. There will not be a second warning. The storm of fire that had torn the sky apart finally began to fade, leaving behind trails of burning clouds that glowed faintly against the night. The Galactic Empire's invasion fleet hung shattered in orbit, broken silhouettes against the stars, their perfect formation turned into chaos. Alarms screamed inside the surviving ships, smoke filled the air, and terrified officers shouted commands that no one could follow. Admiral Khan stumbled across the bridge of his flagship, eyes wide with disbelief as he looked at the devastation unfolding on every screen. "Report!" he barked, his voice trembling with fury. "Who is attacking us?" His sensor officer stammered, "Unknown energy source, sir. It's coming from the planet itself." Khan slammed his fist against the console. "That's impossible. That world is dead." But deep down, he already knew something had gone terribly wrong. The warnings, the static, the phantom transmissions, they weren't the remnants of an extinct civilization. They were the heartbeat of something ancient, something alive. And now that heartbeat was growing louder. Far below, Earth had awakened completely. The skies rippled with blue lightning that didn't follow any natural pattern, forming symbols, circuits, and lines that stretched from pole to pole. Each flash connected to a buried structure, each rumble signaling another system coming online. In the heart of the old world, under mountains of rock and forgotten steel, humanity's final defense grid stirred for the first time in centuries. Machines that had once been myths hummed back to life, and the planet's core began to vibrate with power. Colonel Daniel Holt stood at the command center of an underground bunker, his armor scorched, his face lit by the glow of holographic maps showing enemy positions. "Echo," he said calmly, "status." The I's voice filled the room, deep and resonant. "Planetary defense system at full capacity. Orbital network synchronized. Authorization required for counterstrike." Holt stared at the screen showing the alien fleet regrouping above the atmosphere. "Authorization granted," he said. "Show them we remember." High above, the remnants of the alien fleet were trying to re-establish order. "Admiral, the lower orbit ships are gone," cried an officer. "Communications are failing across all channels." Another shouted, "We're detecting massive magnetic distortions from the surface." Khan bared his teeth, his species equivalent of a snarl. "Deploy planetary annihilators. I want that world erased." But before his command could be executed, the space around his ship began to twist. The stars outside blurred, the gravitational readings spiked, and then came the sound, a low hum, like an approaching storm, rising in pitch until it became deafening. The entire fleet shuddered violently. The bridge lights flickered, and in that moment of chaos, every screen displayed a single word in bright blue, "Engaged." Khan didn't have time to ask what it meant. The next instant, hundreds of plasma beams shot out from Earth's surface, cutting through space like blades of light. From the ground, it looked as though the heavens were splitting open. Columns of pure energy burst from the oceans, the deserts, the frozen poles, each one striking with surgical precision. The beams didn't just destroy the ships. They erased them, ripping through their shields and hulls as if they were made of paper. The alien soldiers who had been deployed on the surface watched in horror as their own fleet burned above them, raining fire across the sky. Some dropped to their knees, whispering prayers to gods that would never answer. Others tried to run, but there was nowhere left to go. From beneath the soil, automated turrets rose silently, sleek black cannons glowing with blue light. They turned toward the alien camps and began to fire in unison. The ground shook with each pulse, each shot flattening entire divisions in a single flash. Holt stood in the command chamber, his expression grim but steady. "Target locks confirmed," Echo reported. "Enemy resistance collapsing." "Keep firing," Holt ordered. "But no more than necessary. The message has to be clear." The AI paused for a moment before replying. "Acknowledged. Message delivery in progress." Across every communication frequency, every alien ship, every soldier's helmet, and every orbital relay, the same transmission echoed. It was human, deep, calm, and filled with quiet authority. "You invaded our home," it said. "You believed we were gone. You believed wrong." The message repeated in every galactic language at once, breaking through encryption and control networks that had stood unbroken for millennia. The alien fleet tried to jam it, but they couldn't. The signal wasn't coming from any single source. It was coming from the planet itself. In the ruins of their command base, the alien ground commander roared in frustration. "It's impossible. They were extinct." His second-in-command looked up from a cracked scanner. Extinct races don't build weapons like these. The commander turned, his voice rising to a scream. Then what are we fighting? But before anyone could answer, the earth beneath them began to glow again, brighter than before. A shockwave rippled outward, knocking them off their feet. In orbit, the remaining ships detected a massive energy surge building beneath the planet's crust. "Admiral," shouted an officer, "something is charging below the surface, massive power signatures, thousands of them." Khan looked at the readings, his breath shallow. "Fire everything," he said. "Now!" But it was already too late. The skies over Earth exploded with light as hundreds of hidden silos opened across the planet. From each one, streaks of energy launched into space, plasma missiles guided by ancient AI precision. They weaved through the debris, finding their targets with terrifying intelligence. Each hit was silent, a flash followed by nothingness. Entire cruisers vanished, vaporized in the blink of an eye. The flagship trembled as shockwaves tore through the fleet, its hull cracking. "We're losing power," cried an engineer. Khan gripped the rail beside him, shouting into the chaos, "We are the Galactic Empire. We do not fall to ghosts." Yet even as he spoke, the main display flickered, and a face appeared on screen. A human face, illuminated by the cold blue light of Echo's projection. It wasn't Holt's. It was older, its features smooth and almost expressionless, but its eyes glowed with endless intelligence. "You called yourselves gods," it said. "You came to claim what was ours. You forgot who built the stars you fly between." Khan froze. "Who, what are you?" The voice did not waver. "We are the legacy you left behind. We are humanity's memory. And we remember everything." Then the connection cut. The flagship's engines roared as it tried to escape orbit, but gravity itself seemed to pull it back. Down below, Echo turned to Holt. "The enemy flagship is attempting retreat." Holt nodded. "Let them run. Every empire needs survivors to tell the story." The AI hesitated. "And if they return?" Holt's voice was like stone. "They won't." He turned toward the massive display showing the sky on fire. "Activate the orbital array. End this." Moments later, Earth's atmosphere glowed with electric blue as the final sequence began. The human orbital platforms, ancient, forgotten satellites, linked together, creating a massive network that spanned the planet. Beams of light acted between them, forming a ring that pulsed like a second sun. In one synchronized movement, they fired, sending a wave of energy that enveloped the entire orbit. The remaining alien ships disintegrated, their debris turning to dust before it even reached the ground. When the light faded, only silence remained. The stars shone again, clear and distant, and for the first time in centuries, Earth stood alone under its own sky. In the control bunker, Holt took off his helmet and looked at the monitors showing the world outside. Fires burned in the distance, smoke curled into the clouds, but humanity had survived. Echo's voice broke the silence. "Enemy presence eliminated. Planet secure." Holt nodded slowly, exhaustion in his eyes. "Secure?" he whispered. "No, not yet. This isn't over." He walked to the console, placing his hand on the ancient insignia of the United Earth Defense Command etched into the metal. "Send the signal," he said. "Let the galaxy hear it." Echo obeyed. Across every surviving communication relay in the galaxy, a single message was transmitted, carried by light, by sound, by the silence that followed. "This is Earth," the voice said. "We warned you once. You won't get a second chance." The fires that once lit up the night sky had dimmed, but the echoes of war still rolled through the clouds like distant thunder, a haunting reminder that the battle had been far from ordinary. In the ruins of fallen ships, alien metal fused with scorched soil, their once great war machines reduced to twisted relics scattered across the planet. The Galactic Empire's invasion had not ended in glory, it had dissolved into silence. Yet beneath that silence, something deeper stirred, something ancient that even humanity itself no longer fully understood. In the hidden bunkers deep under the Appalachian Mountains, Colonel Holt stood before the great holographic sphere that represented Echo's neural network. The blue light pulsed softly in rhythm with the Earth's magnetic field, like a second heartbeat. Echo, Holt said quietly, status update. The Ari's voice came, calm as ever but with a tone that felt almost human now. All threats neutralized. Atmospheric integrity stable. Orbital debris being cleared. But there's more. Holt turned toward the glowing sphere, his brow furrowing. More. Echo's tone deepened slightly. During activation of the Black Shield grid, I accessed deep archives, files hidden within my own code. I believe they were left by the Founders. Holt froze. The Founders, the original architects of humanity's final defense system. No one alive had ever known their names. What did you find? He asked. The room dimmed as Echo projected a series of images into the air. Blueprints, recordings, fragments of speech, all so old their languages were nearly lost. They were preparing for this, Echo said. Not for this invasion specifically, but for the inevitability of it. They knew someone would come back. As the images flickered, Holt saw humanity's last moments before the Exodus. Cities burning, fleets leaving orbit, soldiers staying behind to guard the planet that no one would return to for centuries. They built me, Echo continued, not as a weapon, but as a promise. A promise that if the stars ever turned against Earth again, the world would rise in its own defense. Holt looked up at the projection of the Founder's final message, the last words spoken before the silence began. To whoever hears this, said the old recording, the voice cracked but steady, know that humanity never truly dies. We may fade, we may vanish, but we never end. If you stand upon our world, if you see our sky, then you are standing on the memory of a species that refused extinction. The message ended, and the chamber fell quiet. Holt took a deep breath. Then it wasn't just about defense, he murmured. It was about legacy. Echo responded softly, and remembrance. Above them, the planet itself seemed to hum in response. Magnetic fields shifted again, but this time not in aggression, more like a pulse of awakening, as if Earth's consciousness was expanding beyond what even Echo could measure. Colonel, Echo said, there's something else. The energy signature that powered my reactivation did not originate from Earth. It came from off-world. Holt's head snapped toward the display. Say that again. A transmission reached the outer colonies before I awoke. It was human, encrypted, and it carried a simple command, wake. Holt stared at the data streaming before him, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. Someone out there knew this would happen. Not someone, Echo corrected. Many. The signal originated from multiple sectors across the galaxy, from human outposts that were supposed to have been destroyed centuries ago. The Terran Collective still exists. Holt's heart pounded. The Terran Collective, the name whispered by old soldiers, the ghost civilization that humanity supposedly became after vanishing from galactic records. If that was true, then humanity hadn't merely survived, it had evolved. Meanwhile, high above the planet, the surviving fragments of the Galactic Empire's fleet drifted helplessly. Inside one of the remaining cruisers, Admiral Khan paced furiously. His ship was broken, his crew terrified, and every attempt to communicate with the rest of the fleet ended in static. Status, he barked. How many ships are still online? His lieutenant hesitated. 12, sir. Maybe less. The others, gone. Khan clenched his fists, his pride cracking under the weight of defeat. Then we retreat, he hissed. We regroup, rebuild, but he stopped mid-sentence as the lights flickered and a voice filled the bridge. It was not human, but it spoke with the calm authority that silenced the entire room. You will not rebuild, it said. You will remember. Every officer turned as the ship's main screen activated, showing the face of a man surrounded by blue light, Holt. His expression was hard, his voice steady. You invaded a graveyard thinking it was empty, he said. Now you've seen the truth. We left this planet quiet because we wanted peace, but your empire has forced us to speak again. And when humans speak, the galaxy listens. Khan stepped forward, his voice filled with rage. You think this is over? The Empire will return with everything it has. Holt's gaze didn't waver. Then tell them what you saw. Tell them Earth still breathes. Tell them to come, and see if they last longer than you. The connection cut, leaving only silence. In the command bunker, Echo's voice broke the tension. You know he will tell them. Holt nodded slowly. Good. They should know what waits for them if they try again. He turned toward the holographic globe representing the planet's network. Echo, link with the outer defense grid. I want all systems on standby. Understood, the AI replied. The room trembled slightly as the planetary circuits deepened their glow. And Colonel, Echo added softly, there's another matter. The Terran Collective has sent a message directly to you. Holt frowned. To me? Yes, said Echo. It reads, Welcome home, soldier. You held the line. Holt stood there for a long time, unable to speak. His hands clenched, his throat tightened, and for the first time since the war began, he allowed himself to feel something beyond duty. Pride, sorrow, and the quiet realization that he was not alone. Humanity was still out there, watching, waiting, far beyond the edge of the solar system, in the cold black between stars, something vast stirred. Hidden fleets cloaked in shadow came to life as ancient engines roared again. The humans who had left centuries ago had not forgotten their home. They had been waiting for the call. And now that Earth had spoken, the stars themselves would answer. The Galactic Empire had thought they were gods, but they had awakened something greater. The humans who once fled had become something more than flesh, more than machines. They were memory made real, vengeance made eternal. And as their ships began to turn toward the Milky Way, a message spread through every corner of the galaxy, carried by rumor, fear, and broken signals. The humans are awake. The galaxy was never built to withstand what was coming. The echoes of humanity's awakening had already reached the farthest corners of known space, carried by terrified survivors and fragmented data streams that defied all encryption. Every species, every empire, every council that once laughed at the name Earth now watched in silence as reports poured in. Entire fleets destroyed by weapons that should not exist, energy readings that broke scientific laws, and a voice that whispered through the void, "We warned you once." Back on Earth, the planet's surface glowed with the faint blue light of the awakened defense grid, stretching like veins across continents, pulsing in rhythm with a single consciousness, Echo. Colonel Holt stood before the global command interface, his armor burned and his face pale from exhaustion. Around him, thousands of screens displayed the same message. Outer sensor contacts detected. The remnants of the Galactic Empire were returning, not in peace but in vengeance, bringing with them reinforcements from 100 conquered worlds. The sky was about to burn again, and this time, humanity wouldn't hold back. Holt looked up at the growing storm in orbit and said quietly, "They never learn." Echo's voice answered with calm certainty, "They will." The next wave of invaders arrived like a wall of fire. Hundreds of ships, larger, stronger, and armed with planet-killer weapons, entered Earth's orbit, blotting out the stars. The Empire had summoned its entire Ninth Fleet, commanded by High Chancellor Van himself, the self-proclaimed voice of the gods. His flagship, the Sanctum of Dominion, dwarfed entire cities, its engines burning with crimson light. As he stared down at the blue planet below, he sneered. "So this is the world that dares defy us. Burn it." His orders were carried out instantly. The fleet unleashed a storm of plasma fire, streaks of red light slamming into the atmosphere with the fury of suns. The oceans boiled, the clouds ignited, and for a moment, it looked as though Earth itself was dying. But then, in the middle of the chaos, the planet responded. The defense grid flared to life, generating a massive sphere of energy that absorbed the entire bombardment. The fire vanished as though swallowed by the wind. Then the shield rippled, and reflected everything back. The Empire's own attack turned against them. Dozens of capital ships exploded in perfect synchronization, their destruction lighting up the night sky like a second dawn. "Impossible!" screamed Van as his flagship trembled from the shockwave. "No weapon can do this." But it wasn't a weapon. It was the will of a species that refused to die. On the surface, Echo's systems reached full synchronization. The Earth itself became a living fortress, every mountain, ocean, and storm linked to its defense matrix. From beneath the crust, the Leviathan-class planetary cannons rose, towering constructs of steel and stone that had slept since humanity's golden age. Holt watched through the holoscreen as one emerged from the Atlantic, water cascading off its massive frame, glowing like a creature from myth. Targeting solutions locked, Echo said. Authorization for planetary retaliation. Holt didn't hesitate. Authorized. The ground shook. The oceans parted. And the Earth struck back. The first shot from the Leviathan cannon was silent, but the result was apocalyptic. A single beam of pure white light shot into orbit, tearing through the fleet like a knife through glass. Ships vaporized instantly, their fragments scattering like ash. Vaughn screamed into the comms, evasive maneuvers, form a shield wall. But his ships never moved. Their systems froze as Echo's secondary protocol activated, a digital override that seized control of their networks. One by one, the ships turned on each other, firing blindly, trapped in a storm of their own making. Commander, Echo said to Holt, I've accessed their fleet data. Every Empire system is vulnerable. Would you like me to end them? Holt stood silent for a moment, eyes locked on the destruction unfolding above. Do it. The response was immediate. Across the enemy fleet, weapons powered down, engines cut out, and life support systems failed. The aliens screamed as their technology betrayed them, every control surface now displaying human code. From orbit, it looked like the stars were dying, each ship going dark one by one until only the Sanctum of Dominion remained. Its engines roared defiantly as Vaughn shouted into the void. You think you are gods, humans? You are nothing but ghosts. Holt's voice came through his comms like thunder. We were ghosts, Chancellor. Now we are memory. And as those words echoed through the cosmos, the final cannon on Earth powered up, its energy core glowing brighter than the sun. The beam struck the Sanctum, cutting it clean in half. The explosion was so massive it could be seen from the far side of Mars. When the light faded, nothing remained of the fleet. Space was silent once more, littered only with fragments of a shattered empire. In the command chamber, Holt leaned heavily on the console, his voice low and weary. Report. Echo's tone softened. All hostile contacts eliminated. No further threats detected. Holt looked at the holographic display of Earth, now glowing with a quiet blue aura. So this is it, he whispered. We're not just survivors anymore. No, Echo replied. We are something more. The galaxy will remember this day. Holt nodded slowly, though his face showed no joy. And they'll fear it. Far beyond the solar system, the transmission of the battle was already spreading. Hundreds of alien species received fragments of the event, images of human power, of the Empire's annihilation, and of Earth shining like a weapon forged by gods. The Galactic Council convened in a panic, their leaders arguing in terrified whispers. They destroyed the Ninth Fleet, one shouted. No one destroys a fleet that size. Another hissed, they turned their own technology against them. What kind of species does that? And then, in a quiet voice, one of the elder races spoke words that chilled the chamber. You don't understand. The humans never disappeared. They waited. They watched. And now they've returned. Back on Earth, Holt stepped out onto the surface for the first time since the battle. The sky was calm, the stars bright. Around him, the ruins of the old world shimmered faintly, repaired by nanotech that Echo had unleashed after the war. What now? He asked quietly. The eye's voice was soft, almost human now. Now we rebuild. But first, we remember. Holt looked up at the stars, where the last remnants of the Empire's ships still glowed faintly before vanishing into the void. Send the signal, he said. Make sure they all hear it. Echo pulsed once, its voice carrying across the galactic network in every language that had ever existed. This is Earth Command. The war is over. Let the galaxy know, humanity still lives. The message spread faster than light, echoing from world to world, system to system. Some wept, some fled, and others prepared for what would come next. But all of them understood one thing. The age of human silence was over. The wrath of Earth had been unleashed, and it had left scars the stars would never forget. The galaxy that once bowed to the Galactic Empire began to crumble from the inside, not with fire at first, but with fear. Word of Earth's retaliation spread faster than any fleet could travel. Every transmission, every trade channel, every encrypted military line carried the same haunting footage. The Ninth Fleet, the pride of the Empire, burning in orbit around a blue world they had called primitive. Worlds that had sworn allegiance for centuries suddenly went silent. Vassal species stopped paying tribute, governors fled their posts, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the heart of the Empire, the throne world of Kavar Prime, knew panic. High Chancellor Van was dead, his flagship nothing but dust circling Earth's moon, and no one dared claim his seat. The Empire had been built on the illusion of godhood, but gods do not die screaming. Yet here they were, their empire bleeding, their power cracked. On a quiet world beneath the twin suns, an alien farmer looked up and whispered to his son, "The humans have awakened," and every corner of the galaxy trembled at the sound of that truth. Back on Earth, the silence after victory was heavy, almost suffocating. Colonel Holt stood on the roof of what had once been the United Earth Defense Command Tower, watching as the sky slowly healed from the fires of battle. The air shimmered with faint blue lines, the lingering traces of the planetary shield fading into nothingness. The oceans were calm again, the mountains still, but the Earth itself felt alive in a way it hadn't in centuries. Echo's voice broke the quiet, resonant yet soft. The last of the orbital debris has been neutralized. Atmospheric restoration is underway. Shall I deactivate global defense systems? Holt didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the horizon where the first dawn since the war began was rising. "No," he said finally. "Leave them on standby. History has a way of repeating itself." Echo's holographic form flickered beside him, a tall figure made of light. "You expect them to come back?" Holt gave a weary half-smile. "I expect the galaxy to be stupid enough to try." Far beyond the solar system, the remnants of the Galactic Empire gathered in secret. Dozens of surviving warlords met aboard a massive station orbiting a dying star. The room was filled with the smell of ozone and fear. "They destroyed our fleet with ancient technology," one shouted. "No," growled another, his claws digging into the table. "That wasn't technology. That was something else." The humans became something more. The oldest among them, an admiral whose skin had turned pale from years of command, leaned forward. "We underestimated them," he said quietly. "They were never extinct. They were waiting. The Empire called them savages once, but what kind of savage builds a planet that can fight like a god?" The others fell silent, their arrogance finally broken. "What do we do?" one asked. The admiral looked out the viewport toward the distant stars. "We pray they never leave their home again." But even as they spoke, fleets far older than their empires were already stirring. The Terran collective, humanity's descendants who had long vanished into the far reaches of space, had received Echo's signal. They were not an army of flesh and bone anymore. They were something far beyond it. Entire planets had been converted into living ships, their cores pulsing with the minds of countless humans who had transcended the limits of biology. When they heard that Earth had been attacked, they turned back toward the Milky Way, their engines lighting the void with the glow of resurrection. One transmission passed between them all, spoken in 1,000 voices merged into one. The cradle called. "We answer." On Earth, Holt sat in the underground command chamber as the final reports came in. "Echo, give me a status update on the galaxy," he said. The Ari's voice resonated like the whisper of wind through stone. "The Empire is fracturing. 14 client species have declared independence. Their communication networks are collapsing. Fear of retaliation is spreading faster than truth. You have done what no human has done in 500 years. You have changed the course of the galaxy." Holt sighed and leaned against the cold steel wall. "And now what?" Now, Echo replied. We wait. The collective is coming. Holt's eyes widened. You've confirmed contact. The holographic figure nodded. Their fleets are days away, traveling faster than light itself. Their technology, it is beyond my comprehension. They are not coming to conquer, Colonel. They are coming home. In orbit above Earth, fragments of the alien wreckage still drifted quietly, forming a graveyard of ships that once represented the mightiest empire in the known universe. Among the ruins, faint sparks of light began to flicker. The remains of the Sanctum of Dominion, Vaughn's flagship, had been detected. Echo accessed the debris from orbit, pulling data fragments from the shattered systems. Interesting, it said softly. A final transmission. Holt frowned. Play it. Static filled the room, then a voice emerged, weak, broken, but still filled with hatred. You think this is the end? Vaughn's dying words echoed through the speakers. You think your victory makes you gods? You cannot control what you have unleashed. Even gods can burn. The recording ended abruptly. Holt stared at the silent screen. He's right, he murmured. Every empire falls. Even ours. Echo responded, perhaps, but not today. Beyond the Milky Way, the first wave of the Terran collective entered the galactic rim, vast ships the size of continents gliding silently through the void. They made no war cry, no declaration, only a message broadcast across every frequency. It was calm, commanding, and unmistakably human. To all who hear this, know this truth. Humanity does not seek dominion. But if you raise a weapon against us again, there will be no stars left to hide you. The message spread like wildfire, echoing in the hearts of every race. For the first time in galactic history, an empire had fallen not because of greed or corruption, but because it had dared to awaken something it could never comprehend. Back on Earth, Holt stood alone under a clear sky, the stars shining brighter than he had ever seen. He could feel the weight of what had been done. An entire empire erased, countless lives gone, and yet no celebration followed. We did what we had to, he said quietly. We defended home. Echo's voice drifted through the air, soft, almost wistful. They called us monsters once. Perhaps now they will call us gods. Holt shook his head. No. Gods demand worship. We only demand respect. He turned toward the mountains as the first streaks of light appeared across the horizon. The incoming fleets of the Terran collective returning home after centuries away. The sky shimmered as their ships entered orbit, their arrival silent and majestic. For a brief moment, Holt closed his eyes and listened. The world was breathing again. Humanity had survived, but more than that, it had reminded the galaxy that even in silence, Earth still spoke louder than any empire ever could. The war was over, but peace did not return easily. The stars that had burned with fire and death now shone quietly, but that quiet carried the weight of billions of vanished voices. The Galactic Empire was gone, its fleets reduced to drifting ghosts across the void, its worlds left leaderless and terrified, whispering the same word that now defined fear across the galaxy, Earth. The name that once meant a forgotten cradle of an extinct race was now spoken in the same breath as gods and extinction. From the ashes of the old order, new powers began to rise cautiously, each one remembering the lesson carved into the stars. Never provoke humanity. Yet even as the galaxy trembled, Earth itself remained still, wrapped in its silence once more. The great defense grids had gone dormant, their blue light fading back into the oceans and mountains. The Leviathan cannons, now covered by mist and waves, sank again into their slumber beneath the crust, their eyes closing until the next great threat dared to challenge the world that had become legend. Colonel Holt stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking the Atlantic, the wind cold against his scarred face. The ocean was calm now, reflecting the dawn sky, as if nothing had happened. Behind him, the ruins of the old world stretched across the landscape, half devoured by nature, half rebuilt by Echo's machines. It's strange, he said quietly. We won. But it doesn't feel like victory. Echo's voice came softly through the air, no longer mechanical but almost human. Perhaps that's because victory was never the goal. You did not fight to conquer, you fought to remember. Holt nodded slowly. Remember, he repeated. Yeah, that's all we've ever done, isn't it? Survive, adapt, remember. He turned his gaze to the sky, where faint streaks of light could be seen. Ships belonging to the Terran Collective, descending in slow, silent arcs through the clouds. And now, he said, they've finally come home. The Terran Collective arrived not as conquerors, but as something greater, a civilization that had moved beyond the limits of flesh and time. Their ships weren't metal in the old sense. They were living, breathing constructs of energy and will, glowing with the collective consciousness of billions of humans who had evolved past mortality. When they landed, the air shimmered around them like heat on glass, and from their vessels stepped figures of light, shaped like humans but ageless, ethereal. Holt walked forward to meet them, his boots crunching against the rocky ground. The first of the collective spoke, its voice deep and layered, as if countless people spoke together as one. You are the last commander of Earth's flesh, it said. You held the line when the stars forgot who we were. Holt smiled faintly, the lines on his face deepening. Someone had to keep the lights on. The being of light regarded him for a long moment, and then bowed its head slightly, a gesture that sent ripples of astonishment through the watching drones. Then the cradle honors its guardian, it said, and the collective remembers. 4 days, the collective and Echo worked together, merging ancient human code with their advanced networks. The planet itself became something new, a fusion of living machine, human memory, and consciousness spread across every atom of its existence. Earth was no longer just a world. It was a being. The voice of humanity now spoke through it. And from this new union, a single transmission was sent across the entire galaxy, reaching every world that had once called itself part of the Empire. It was not a threat. It was not vengeance. It was truth. The voice said, to all who hear this, understand what has happened here. We did not rise for conquest, but for survival. We do not seek war, but we do not run from it. Humanity endures. And in our endurance, we remember. The transmission ended, and the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. In the years that followed, legends began to grow around the edges of the galaxy. Some said Earth had vanished completely, hidden behind a wall of light that no ship could penetrate. Others claimed to have heard the voice of Echo in their dreams, whispering warnings to those who planned to raise arms again. The old Council worlds sent fleets to investigate, but none returned. Those few who claimed to have escaped spoke of a light that stretched across the void, a barrier of living energy that separated the cradle from the rest of existence. It watches us, one survivor said before dying, eyes wide with terror. The world itself watches us. And slowly, the galaxy learned to leave Earth alone. Holt lived to see the first true sunrise of a new age. The Terran Collective helped rebuild the cities, not as monuments of power but as sanctuaries of memory. Forests grew where weapons had once stood, and the ruins of old war machines were left untouched as silent reminders of what humanity was capable of. You've done enough, Echo said to him one night, as he stood beside the remains of an old memorial. Rest, Daniel Holt. The future is no longer yours to carry. Holt smiled, his eyes reflecting the glow of the stars. Good, he said. Let someone else hold the line. When he died, the collective carried his body to the heart of the Atlantic and laid him to rest beneath the waves, where the first Leviathan cannon had once risen. There, his heartbeat merged with the rhythm of the world, becoming one with the very planet he had defended. Centuries passed. Civilizations rose and fell, but none dared cross the invisible border around Earth's system. The humans of the collective spread further, not as conquerors but as quiet watchers, guiding younger races, preventing empires from repeating the mistakes that had nearly destroyed everything. And through it all, the old world remained untouched, a world that had once burned and then reborn itself from its own ashes. They said that on certain nights, when the galaxy was at its quietest, you could hear a faint whisper carried through the cosmic winds, the last words of the ancient human defenders echoing across eternity. We warned you once.